There's a belief many people carry without ever questioning it. They believe that if they're kind enough, patient enough, generous enough with their time and energy, the world will protect them. They believe goodness is armor, that compassion creates immunity, that being a good person means bad things won't happen to them. This is the first and most dangerous illusion. Kindness is not a shield. Morality does not guarantee safety. Being good does not mean you won't be used, discarded, or betrayed. The world does not operate on fairness. It operates on perception, strategy, and leverage. And those who believe otherwise become the materials through which others build their empires. Let me be clear about what we're exploring here. This is not about becoming cruel. This is not about exploiting innocent people or weaponizing psychology for harm. This is about understanding a fundamental truth that experience teaches, but innocence refuses to learn. The world rewards perception more than intention, and understanding this is the difference between being protected and being prey. There are two types of people navigating the same world. The first believes their goodness protects them. They pour themselves into others expecting reciprocity. They give trust freely, assuming everyone operates with the same moral compass. They measure their value by how much they sacrifice. They see boundaries as selfishness and saying no as a moral failing. The second understands that perception protects them. They control how they're seen, what access others have, and how their energy is distributed. They understand that kindness is a choice, not an obligation. That trust is earned through pattern recognition, not given through optimism. That respect comes from self-respect, and power comes from understanding the rules everyone plays by but few acknowledge. Dark intelligence is not born, it's developed. Through betrayal that wasn't anticipated. Through disappointment that shattered assumptions. Through the slow, painful realization that the people you protected didn't protect you. That the loyalty you gave wasn't returned. That the world you believed in was a story you told yourself while reality operated on different principles entirely. This knowledge exists for three purposes only. Protection, so you recognize manipulation before it consumes you. Awareness, so you see the games being played around you constantly. Self-mastery, so you control your perception, your boundaries, and your positioning in every environment you enter. What we reject, absolutely, is the distortion of this awareness into cruelty. We reject exploitation of innocent people. We reject the weaponization of understanding against those who cannot defend themselves. The goal is not to become predatory. The goal is to understand reality without becoming a victim of it. What follows is a structured psychological framework, not theories, not abstractions. Principles that separate the protected from the vulnerable, the respected from the used, the aware from the naive, the people who control their lives from the people whose lives are controlled by others who understand these principles better. Principle 1. Kindness without discernment is access without limits. Let's start with the psychological foundation. Kind people believe that generosity creates connection. That if they give enough, care enough, show up enough, they'll build relationships based on mutual value. They operate from a belief system that says the right thing to do is be available, helpful, accommodating. That saying yes proves their worth. That sacrifice demonstrates love. This is the trap. Because while they're distributing their energy based on morality, others are receiving it based on opportunity. The kind person sees relationship. The strategic person sees resource. The kind person gives because they believe it's right. The strategic person takes because they recognize access. Strategic people understand something fundamental. Availability creates familiarity, and familiarity creates entitlement. When you're always available, your time loses value. When you always say yes, your no becomes meaningless. When you never enforce consequences, your boundaries become suggestions others ignore. Here's the behavioral contrast. A kind person receives a request. They evaluate it based on whether they can help, whether saying yes is the good thing to do, whether refusing makes them selfish. A strategic person receives the same request. They evaluate it based on precedent, pattern, and positioning. What precedent does saying yes establish? What pattern has this person demonstrated? What positioning does this interaction create in the relationship dynamic? The kind person makes decisions based on the individual moment. The strategic person makes decisions based on systemic implications. In relationships, This looks like giving chances to people who've demonstrated they don't value them. Staying available to people who only reach out when they need something. Continuing to invest in connections where the energy flows one direction. In work environments, it's staying late constantly while others leave on time. Taking on extra projects without extra compensation. Being the person everyone asks, because you never say no, which means you're useful but not respected. In leadership, it's being liked but not followed. Being kind but not effective. Creating environments where people are comfortable but not accountable. The Machiavellian interpretation is simple. People will take what you allow them to take, not because they're evil, but because human nature optimizes for efficiency. If you're always available, they'll always reach out. If you're always help, they'll always ask. If you never enforce boundaries, they'll never respect them. This doesn't mean become cold. It means become discerning. Kindness without discernment is how good people end up exhausted, resentful, and surrounded by users who genuinely don't understand why you're upset, because you trained them that your needs don't matter. The ethical containment here is crucial. Understanding this doesn't mean withholding kindness. It means directing it strategically. Being kind to people who reciprocate. Generous with those who value it. Available to those who respect your time. This isn't cruelty. This is intelligence. Principle 2. Moral behavior does not control others' actions. The psychological framework most kind people operate from assumes symmetry. If I'm loyal, others will be loyal to me. If I'm honest, others will be honest with me. If I treat people well, I'll be treated well in return. This is magical thinking. Your morality controls your behavior. It does not control anyone else's. You can be the most honest person in the room and still be lied to. The most loyal person and still be betrayed. The most generous person and still be exploited. Because others' actions are determined by their values, their incentives, their character, and their circumstances, not by your expectations. Approval-seeking people struggle with this intensely. They've built an identity around being good, which creates an unconscious contract. If I'm good enough, I'll be safe. If I'm kind enough, I'll be valued. If I'm helpful enough, I'll be protected. But no one signed this contract except you. Self-contained individuals understand that their behavior establishes their integrity, not their safety. They act according to their values because those values define who they are, not because those values guarantee outcomes. They know that doing the right thing might still result in the wrong thing happening to them. This is the difference between emotional reactors and perceptual controllers. Emotional reactors build expectations based on their investment. They give trust, then feel betrayed when it's not honored. They sacrifice time, then feel resentful when it's not appreciated. They maintain loyalty, then feel devastated when it's not returned. Perceptual controllers give strategically while maintaining awareness. They extend trust incrementally based on demonstrated pattern. They invest time where it's valued and withdraw it where it's not. They maintain loyalty where it's mutual and reposition where it's one-sided. In relationships, this shows up as staying with someone who's repeatedly demonstrated they won't change, because leaving feels like giving up on your own goodness. You're not fighting for the relationship. You're fighting for your self-image as someone who doesn't quit. In work, it's believing that working harder will eventually be recognized, even as you watch people who work less get promoted because they're better at managing perception than producing output. In social hierarchies, it's assuming the person who's nicest will be most respected, while watching the person who controls access, manages image, and sets clear boundaries command the room. The Machiavellian truth: the world rewards results and perception. Morality is admirable, but it's not currency. You can be right and still lose. You can be good and still be discarded. You can be loyal and still be betrayed. Your morality determines your character. It does not determine your outcomes. Before we go deeper, if you're still following, drop this in the comments. I choose strategic awareness over blind optimism. Not for validation, not for engagement, for commitment. For the psychological shift to seeing reality as it functions, not as we were taught it should. Principle 3. Emotional transparency. Without strategic awareness, is vulnerability weaponized? Kind people pride themselves on emotional honesty. They share their fears, insecurities, struggles. They believe vulnerability creates intimacy, that openness builds trust, that being real means being unfiltered, and they're correct about one thing. Vulnerability does create intimacy. The question is, with whom? Because vulnerability in the wrong hands doesn't create connection. It creates ammunition, information that can be used later, leverage that can be applied strategically, weaknesses that can be exploited when convenient. The psychological framing here is about the difference between authenticity and strategic transparency. Authentic people share everything with everyone, believing that being real requires being completely open. They confuse emotional honesty with wisdom. They think holding back is being fake. Strategically transparent people understand that different relationships warrant different levels of access. They're authentic in what they share, but strategic about what they withhold. They know that not everyone has earned access to their full internal world. Here's the contrast in behavior. Someone asks how you're doing. The emotionally transparent person downloads their entire emotional state, current struggles, fears, uncertainties. They believe this is being real. The strategically transparent person calibrates their response to the relationship. With a trusted friend who's proven reciprocal care, they share deeply. With an acquaintance, they share surface-level truth. With someone who's demonstrated they use information against people, they share nothing of value. In relationships, unlimited emotional transparency looks like sharing every doubt, every fear, every insecurity, then being shocked when those vulnerabilities get used against you in an argument, or shared with others, or held over you as proof of your instability. In work environments, it's telling your manager every struggle you're facing, then watching those struggles become reasons you're not promoted. Or sharing frustrations with coworkers, who later repeat them to leadership, framed differently than you intended. In negotiation, it's revealing your actual position, your constraints, your desperation, then wondering why you always get unfavorable terms. The power dynamic is straightforward. The person with more information has more power. When you share everything while others share selectively, you've created asymmetry that favors them. The Machiavellian principle. Control information like you control territory. Strategic people understand that what you reveal, when you reveal it, and to whom you reveal it, determines your positioning. They share vulnerabilities that humanize them without weakening their position. They reveal information that builds connection without creating leverage against them. The ethical boundary. This is not about being fake. This is about being wise. You can be completely authentic while being selective about distribution. Authenticity is about truth. Strategy is about timing and audience. They're not contradictory. They're complementary. Principle 4, boundaries are not negotiated. They're established. Kind people treat boundaries like requests they're making of others. They explain them, justify them, defend them. They hope others will understand and respect them. They believe that if they communicate clearly enough, people will honor their limits. This fundamentally misunderstands what boundaries are. Boundaries are not requests you make of others. They're commitments you make to yourself about what you will and won't tolerate. They're not enforced through hope. They're enforced through consequences. The psychological difference is enormous. People who see boundaries as requests seek permission. They say no, then explain why. They set a limit, then defend it when challenged. They create a boundary, then feel guilty enforcing it. People who see boundaries as commitments state reality. They say no without justification. They set limits without defense. They enforce consequences without guilt. The behavioral pattern. Someone crosses a stated boundary. The request-oriented person reminds them of the boundary, explains why it matters, hopes they'll respect it next time. The boundary gets crossed again. They remind again. The boundary becomes a suggestion people ignore because there's no cost to ignoring it. The commitment-oriented person states the boundary once. When it's crossed, they enforce a consequence. They don't argue, explain, or defend. They act. The boundary holds because violating it has an actual cost. In relationships, this is the difference between saying, "I need you to stop doing that" repeatedly while accepting the behavior continuing, versus saying it once and then adjusting your engagement when the behavior continues. In work, it's the difference between telling your manager you can't work weekends while working every weekend they ask, versus declining weekend work and accepting whatever professional consequences that creates. In social dynamics, It's the difference between asking people to respect your time while remaining available whenever they reach out, versus being available when you choose and unavailable when you don't, regardless of whether that disappoints others. The power dynamic. People who negotiate boundaries train others that their limits are flexible. People who enforce boundaries train others that their limits are firm. One gets respected through pattern. The other gets ignored through pattern. The Machiavellian reality. Respect isn't given to what you say. It's given to what you enforce. You can state boundaries eloquently while being completely disrespected. If those boundaries have no teeth, you can state them simply while being completely respected. If violation carries consistent consequences. Strategic people understand that boundaries are discovered through enforcement, not declaration. Others learn your actual limits not by what you say, but by what you tolerate. Principle 5. Self-sacrifice is not virtue. When it creates dependence, there's a particular trap kind people fall into that feels noble but functions as dysfunction. They create value through being needed. They become the person others can't function without. The one who solves problems, manages emotions, handles crises, fills gaps. They sacrifice their own needs, time, energy, to ensure others are okay. And they believe this makes them valuable. It does make them useful. But useful and valued are different things. The psychological mechanism here is complex. People who derive worth from being needed unconsciously select relationships and create dynamics where others become dependent on them, not through conscious manipulation, but through consistent patterns of rescuing, fixing, and solving. They don't create respect. They create addiction. The contrast in thinking. People who build value through sacrifice believe my worth is measured by what I do for others. If I'm not solving problems, I'm not valuable. If others can't handle things without me, I'm not needed. People who build value through competence believe my worth is inherent in who I am and what I'm capable of. I help strategically, not compulsively. Others' ability to function without me demonstrates the effectiveness of my support, not my irrelevance. In relationships, self-sacrifice looks like being the emotional manager, the one who regulates everyone's feelings, smooths over conflicts, ensures everyone else is comfortable, while your own needs remain unmet. You're not building partnership. You're building dependence that looks like love. In work, it's being the person who handles everything others can't or won't. You're not becoming indispensable. You're becoming imprisoned by competence that others exploit while taking credit for. In family dynamics, it's being the one who sacrifices for everyone else's success, comfort, or stability, while your own life remains on hold indefinitely. The power dynamic is inverted from what it appears. The person everyone depends on seems powerful but is actually trapped. Your value is contingent on maintaining others' dysfunction. If they became capable, healthy, independent, your role disappears. The Machiavellian lens. Strategic people create value through results that elevate others without creating dependence. They teach, mentor, support in ways that increase others' capacity, which increases respect for them. They're valued for making people better, not for keeping people dependent. Sacrificial people create value through indispensability. That requires keeping others somewhat incapable. They're needed for preventing collapse, not for enabling excellence. The ethical reframe, true support creates independence. If your help keeps people dependent, you're not helping. You're enabling. And you're doing it often because being needed feels safer than being valued for who you are, rather than what you do. Principle 6. Niceness is not strength. Boundaries are. There's a profound confusion in most kind people between being nice and being strong. They believe that kindness, agreeableness, accommodation demonstrate strength. That being difficult, demanding, or uncompromising demonstrates weakness or insecurity. This is backward. Niceness is often fear wearing a moral costume. Fear of conflict, fear of rejection, fear of being seen as difficult, demanding, or selfish. So it presents as virtue. I'm just a kind person. I don't like conflict. I want everyone to get along. But beneath that virtue is often terror. If I assert myself, I'll be abandoned. If I demand respect, I'll be rejected. If I'm not agreeable, I'll be alone. Real strength is the capacity to be disliked and remain centered, to set boundaries that disappoint others and not collapse under their disappointment, to prioritize your own needs even when it creates conflict. The psychological difference: nice people manage others' emotions at the expense of their own needs. They say yes when they mean no. They smile when they're upset. They accommodate when they want to refuse. They do this because others' comfort feels more urgent than their own integrity. Boundaried people manage their own integrity regardless of others' emotions. They say no and let others manage their disappointment. They express displeasure and let others manage their defensiveness. They prioritize themselves and let others manage their expectations. In relationships, niceness looks like accepting treatment you don't respect, because addressing it might create tension. Boundaries look like addressing it immediately and accepting the tension as the cost of self-respect. In work, niceness looks like accepting conditions you find unacceptable because pushing back might make you seem difficult. Boundaries look like negotiating or leaving and accepting the professional consequences as the cost of self-advocacy. In social environments, niceness looks like agreeing with positions you disagree with, laughing at jokes you find offensive, participating in conversations you find meaningless because disagreeing might create friction. The power dynamic: nice people give power to others by making others' emotional states their responsibility. Boundaried people keep power by making their own integrity their priority. Others learn they can extract compliance through displays of disappointment, anger, or withdrawal. The nice person will eventually accommodate to restore harmony. But boundaried people, others learn those tactics don't work. The boundaried person will tolerate the discomfort of others' negative emotions rather than compromise their boundaries. The Machiavellian truth: respect flows to those who respect themselves. People who chronically prioritize others' comfort over their own needs aren't respected, they're used. Not because others are malicious, but because human nature responds to what you demonstrate about your own value. If you demonstrate that your comfort is less important than theirs, they'll believe you. If you demonstrate that your boundaries matter less than their preferences, they'll agree. The progression of awareness. Understanding moves through predictable stages. You start with kindness as your operating system. You believe goodness protects you, that doing right results in being treated right. You're naive, but not because you're stupid, because you haven't yet accumulated the data that contradicts this worldview. Then comes vulnerability. You get betrayed by someone you trusted, used by someone you helped, abandoned by someone you sacrificed for. The kindness that was supposed to protect you becomes the access point through which you got damaged. This creates a crisis. You can retreat into cynicism, becoming hard, closed, suspicious, or you can progress into awareness. Awareness means understanding that the world operates on principles you weren't taught, that perception matters more than intention, that boundaries are intelligence, not cruelty, that strategic thinking is protection, not manipulation. From awareness comes boundaries. You stop giving access freely. You stop trusting without evidence. You stop sacrificing without reciprocity. You're not being mean. You're being precise about where your energy goes. Boundaries create power, not power over others, but power over your own life. You're no longer controlled by others' expectations, others' emotions, others' needs. You've reclaimed agency. Power enables self-mastery. You're not reacting to life. You're positioning yourself strategically in every environment. You understand the games being played. You see the dynamics others miss. You're operating from awareness while others operate from assumption. This isn't about becoming cold. It's about becoming conscious. The warmth is still there. The kindness remains, but it's directed strategically, protected intelligently, distributed to those who value it, rather than broadcast to everyone hoping some of it creates the connection you're seeking. The philosophical reframe. Kindness is a choice, not an obligation. You're not morally required to sacrifice yourself for others. You're not obligated to prioritize everyone else's needs above your own. You're not responsible for managing everyone else's emotions while neglecting your own. You can choose kindness from a position of strength, giving to those who reciprocate, supporting those who value it, being generous when it aligns with your values and serves your life. Boundaries are intelligence, not cruelty. Saying no protects your yes. Limiting access preserves your energy. Enforcing consequences maintains your standards. This isn't being mean. This is being strategic about a finite resource, your life. Protection is perception control, not aggression. You control how you're seen, what access others have, what information you share. You manage your image not through manipulation, but through awareness of how perception shapes treatment. Self-respect is the foundation of respect from others. When you demonstrate through your behavior that you value yourself, others will either match that valuation or remove themselves. Both outcomes protect you. People who don't respect themselves train others not to respect them, through accepting disrespect, tolerating mistreatment, and remaining available regardless of how they're treated. People who respect themselves create environments where respect is required for access, not through demands, but through demonstrated standards. If this shifted how you see kindness and power, like this video. If someone you know needs to hear this, share it. If you want more of this perspective, subscribe and turn on notification. Comment which principle hit hardest and which boundary you're building. Self-respect before approval, awareness before trust, strategy before sentiment, control before chaos.